Pathfinder. The Pepsi to D&D's... Actually, that's not the most apt comparison. Pathfinder's more like the Whataburger of the tabletop community. Most people only know it by name, but it has a die-hard fan base. But for the better part of a decade, Pathfinder was the tabletop RPG to beat, challenging the de facto king for the top spot. As someone whose first real introduction to tabletop role-playing was Pathfinder, it held a special place in my heart even after switching to 5e. So needless to say, I was hyped when I first heard about 2nd edition coming out. But now that it's been out for a little over a year, the best way I can sum up the system as a whole is this.
You were the chosen one! You were saying that you would destroy us and not join them!
And to unpack that analysis, a brief history lesson. In 2008, Wizards of the Coast released Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, which was intended to be a massive overhaul of the system. Powers reinvented the class system, skill points were gone, and saves became static defenses rather than bonuses to rolls. The system was not well received. So the king was dead, and a void opened up in the tabletop community, looking for something new after playing 3.5 for the last 10 years. I mean, what else were they gonna do? Play World of Darkness? Sorry, but my god phase ended after the black-haired girl blocked me on Facebook. In enters Paizo, who decided they were gonna make their own D&D with blackjack and hookers, leading to Pathfinder's release in 2009. It lifted the rules from 3.5, slapped on a fresh coat of paint, and made grappling somewhat understandable. The community loved it, and Paizo reigned supreme in the tabletop market until D&D 5e came out in 2014. But Paizo wouldn't go gently into that good night and went to work coming up with plans for Pathfinder's 2nd edition. This time around, rather than just abusing D&D's open game license and flipping a previous edition for profit, Paizo decided to play up the differences between their game and D&D to take it in a totally new direction. That ended up looking like a previous edition of D&D anyway.
My nipples are fucking purple!
I'll be real with you. I can count on one hand how many 4e sessions I've played, and a cross-country move followed by a plague has prevented me from finding a group to play 2e with as of yet. However, having skimmed over the books for both systems and watching a few videos from other YouTubers, I started to notice a few similarities. For example, the big draw for 4e was supposed to be how all the different powers gave you enough customization options to fill a beanbag chair big enough for a Pixar mom character to sit in. However, most of these powers were really only designed with 2 or 3 builds in mind, meaning your options were a lot thinner than you realized. Same thing with Pathfinder 2e. There are a shit ton of class feats to choose from, but only a handful that would actually benefit any theoretical character you might make. Now, some of you might want to throw around words like power gaming and min-maxing, but this isn't even about the numbers, though it probably should be since Pathfinder is a numbers-heavy game. If you picked an archery feat at level 1, it probably means you want to be good at archery, so you're going to want to take more archery feats as you level up. Yes, theoretically you could go for a shield feat next level, but you'd just be trading your ability to be good at the thing you chose in the beginning to suck slightly less at something else. It's like if I walked up to you and offered you a choice between a bowl of buttery, lightly salted popcorn or stapling a brick to your nutsack. Nobody's picking the brick. Speaking of options, once you've decided on your powers in 4e, all that variety goes out the window. Anyone even remotely familiar with 4e has most likely heard it compared to MMOs. You develop these rotations you used every encounter, either based on some sort of synergy or just using your strongest ability first and going down the list. The closest a lot of encounters came to using strategy was trying not to use your daily power on a minion. This, combined with all the numbers and conditions you had to keep track of, made combat very long and very boring. Again, we see similar problems with 2e, where most builds have at least 2 actions they're going to do every turn in order to stay relevant. More time in any given combat encounter is spent remembering which conditions are still in effect on which characters than deciding what those characters are actually doing, meaning the combat in this combat-centric game feels like a chore. Now, am I saying that Pathfinder 2e is as bad as D&D 4e? Of course not. It's worse.
Well, that was pretty goddamn weird.
Don't get me wrong, I really want to like this system, but there are just so many design choices that make me ask, why? Like, there are alignment-based damage types. Why? As if the alignment system wasn't already a hotly contested issue, now you're gonna add combat mechanics to it? Plus, you're literally giving yourself extra vulnerabilities by playing anything other than true neutral. Then there's the incapacitation trait, which means the target always gets 1 degree of success better if they're even 1 level higher than you. Why? Wouldn't the level difference already be enough? Was the chance of some GM's boss monster getting stun locked really worth nerfing single target crowd control into the ground? But these are just little niggles I have with this system. None of them are deal breakers for me. What really grinds my gears is something that technically isn't an issue anymore, but I'm surprised nobody talked about it until now. I'm talking about how, at release, Pathfinder 2e was broken. Like, game doesn't function broken. For almost a year after the game came out, there were glaring issues all over the book. From ancestries getting proficiencies in weapons they didn't have access to classes not getting a spellcasting ability for their spells, to just everything with the alchemist. I mean, I'm not one of those people who hate when tabletop RPGs get too video gamey, but these are not the game companies I want them to emulate. And this isn't some fledgling startup making their first game. This is the company behind the second and third highest selling games on the market. Paizo's been at this for over a decade, but the best solution they can come up with for game design is patch notes? Yes, they keep their online resources up to date, and yes, the PDFs for the core rules have been updated to the second printing. But if you bought a physical copy of the CRB when it was released, something fans of analog games tend to want to do, your only recourse is to fork over another $50 for the updated version or invest in sticky notes, and that is just unacceptable. And yet, I still can't hate this game. I love the big numbers. I love the epic abilities certain classes get. I want to make more Pathfinder videos in the future. But I also believe in taking a closer look at the things we love so we can make them even better. So Paizo, if you're watching this, and you'd be the only one, next time you want to put out a 640-page rulebook, maybe spend less time on making rules for different types of jumps, and more time on editing. That's all I ask. Oh, and if you could make Animal Rage make sense, that'd be great.